Brent, I am so excited to have you here. I know we've been longtime online friends and offline colleagues, and I'm so excited to really dig in because honestly, there's some things that I don't know about your story that I'm excited to hear about. So welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, so I don't think that in all of our conversations, I've ever actually heard how you started or what was the idea behind Multifamily Insiders. How did this brainchild happen?
Failure. So failure led to this really. So when I got into the industry, it was on purpose, which is weird for a lot of people. Most people fall into it, but I actually loved the idea of the industry, specifically when it came to resident retention, because I was in finance, which is not at all related for a lot of the on-site operation stuff. And I had hopped from community to community. A lot of people do that, right? And I always felt, shoot, if I just knew one other person at this community, there was gonna be a much greater chance of me staying. I may not, but it would up my chances, right? And yet it was hard to meet people. Like, I think a lot of people realize that it's just, you're very isolated, especially when you think about garden style apartments. It's, you go into your little spot right in front of your apartment, and maybe there's 5 other doors right by you, and you may cross paths with them. And then even if you do cross paths with them, the chances that they may be a good connection point for you, like you have similar interests, it's just pretty low. So my thought was, how do we connect people better? And so when I got in the industry, at first I did events. So I was an event planner, and that was a wild ride in itself. But yeah, absolutely. We did some events where I remember one, it was in a very seedy area. And so we went, and I was putting out balloons, and I have these balloons, I'm taking them to the front gate, right? I'm going to tie them up. And as I'm walking out there, keep in mind that this is not I'm kind of terrified at this moment. And I'm walking, and I hear this bang. I was like, I dropped to the ground with these balloons in my hand, right? I'm just like flattened like a pancake to the ground. And I look around and I realize that nothing's happening. And I look over, and one of my balloons has popped. And so I'm sitting there with these balloons, with a pop balloon. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I look like a fool. And so I go over and I walk over and I tie my balloons up. And yeah, that was my first adventure.
I have to stop you because, I'm serious. I've never shared this with you. I one time was contracted to speak for FPI management, and they had done the event at a baseball field, and they had these balloon arches over me. And there had been some shootings like the week before. So not in the area, but just on the news. So I'm not kidding you. One of the balloons popped, but I did not know that's what happened. I too dropped to the floor and literally looked around, and I had this whole stage full of people looking at me. It was the most embarrassing moments, but I feel like we are kindred spirits. Because that was both of our reaction was like, drop to the floor.
We both have negative experiences with balloons. I don't know if that's like the bonding point that we should have or not, but sure, let's go for it.
That would have connected us if we were neighbors.
Absolutely.
Okay, so keep telling us. You're telling us then what happened. So you're event planning.
So I realized that wasn't scalable. So then I switched over, at least for what I wanted to do. At least. So then I was like, well, at that moment, social media was just getting its legs under it. And so I was like, well, why don't we have a social network for apartment communities? Because then they can get to know each other in a very comfortable environment. Not everybody would come to our events. And there's a lot of people who just didn't feel like it's a weird environment. The only thing you have in common is that you happen to be living in the same area. And some people are okay with that. And some people aren't. So if you could have something online, the introverts of the world could go in there and they could just kind of dip their toes into the social fabric of the community, right?
Right.
And so that was my grand plan, and it worked until it didn't work when I realized that property managers at the time, they didn't want the residents actually talking to each other. They wanted to chaperone everything, right? But the idea that they would talk to each other like outside of their little watchful eye was terrifying for them because, maybe they talk about the car break-ins or what was their rent increase or whatever. And so there was definitely fear there. And it didn't help that, MySpace was still the big thing at that point. So, we were the MySpace of multifamily, which had its own little ring to it, but MySpace didn't have the best, reputation. So we, it just didn't hit the right chords. And so Multifamily Insiders then was a spring off of that. So it was a next iteration to help the industry understand what social networking was. And the idea was that let's first get them used to this concept, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how can we implement this concept with your communities now that you feel more comfortable with it. And we just never went back. It grew so fast, so quickly that we're like, this is obviously where we need to be. So we just stayed with it.
That is incredible. We're talking about community, but I also think just a point I want to put a pin on or extract from that was also pivoting, that when you land on something that, I think sometimes people view things as a failure, but what happened is you took something that could have been a failure and really you saw then where the opportunity was. And it's almost like but it came through action. It didn't just immediately come from itself. So I think that's a great point too, that even in property management, sometimes you're going to try things, they're not going to work, but it might be the springboard for the next great thing. And man, what a great thing it's turned out. I think
yes. Just let me chime in real quick.
Yeah.
I always heard that only 1 out of 10 startups succeed. And so my theory was, well, let's start up 10, then we're good, right?
Right.
But it turns out that actually after the first one, it's like something like 1 out of 4 startups succeed because you learn so much that first time around that you're able to implement and really, step up your game this next time around. And so hopefully if you keep at it, you kind of land on something that hits the right chords.
Absolutely. Yeah. We started out as a staging mini models. So I guess I had I never thought about that. That was my iteration. And then we pivoted. So you guys have made an incredible community. And I think as an outsider, I'm in marketing and I have marveled at what you initially really built from the ground up. And I've seen this community. People are fiercely loyal. They identify themselves as being part of the Multifamily Insiders community. That's not an easy thing to do. I think that, customers, I don't want to say customers, but people seem to be very, not necessarily always brand loyal. And you guys have been able to do that. So why do you think that community is so important to multifamily individuals?
Well, I think, community is important to everybody to some degree. I mean, we all need that connection point, but I think especially in multifamily, we are such a unique industry. People are, what we offer people is a highly emotionally charged thing, their home, right? I mean, there's very few things that people are more connected to, right? Their family probably. So you already have something that's very, very intense with them. And then our office is at their home, which is just a bizarre thought.
It is so weird.
Yeah. And so you just have these opportunities for conflict and challenges because they're, really upset about something and they can just walk right over. And now we have this face-to-face confrontation. So not only do people need, help with, hey, just in general, how do I run my communities better? But then also I need that community because I need to have that bonding moment to say we've all been there. We've all had those trouble residents or even the opposite true is, those really amazing scenarios that happen that again, only happen when you deal with something very highly emotionally charged. So to have that kind of camaraderie in a very uniquely challenging industry, I think is really important.
I would agree. And, if you just read through some of the posts or some of the, different conversations that happen, they're so real, they're so honest. People feel safe to share some of these crazy things that literally you couldn't make some of this stuff up, right? And yet
Right.
It's almost like you might be having a bad day. And I wonder sometimes if that's what happens. If someone's having a bad day, they get onto one of these platforms that you've, put together, whether it's on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on the blog, and they're communicating and they're getting that feeling of like, hey, I'm not alone. Like I can, it's almost like that fuel to keep going. Do you find that to be true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Um, you know, I think absolutely they need that sense of I'm not alone, like you said. But I think what's also interesting about the community is you get a pulse for the industry where you start seeing how our industry as a whole needs to evolve and react to the challenges that are happening in multifamily. Our on-site teams are probably more stressed out than they've ever been. I worked on site. I know how it is. It's nothing like when I was there.
Right.
The amount of tasks they have are just so much greater. And so you can now hear these voices and sharing the challenges. I saw a post that just came through today about how, and this person's like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. What other industries should I look at? And it's like, it's sad, but also hopefully my hope is that it allows us to be introspective with our industry and learn how to make it better, make that experience of working on site better so that we pull things away from the on-site team to make it easier on them. We provide more health and wellness, mental well-being types of content. We just had Lori Snyder on a week or two ago, and she was talking about mental well-being and how important that is. And we're getting more of that where it's like, I need those extra resources for both myself and my team and helping them cope with what's going on right now.
Yeah, I saw that come through, and I don't share every single one, but that one I sent out to our members, and invited them to register from your
I
email.
love that. Thank you.
You're welcome, but it's exactly what you're saying, because you see it and it's just something that is needed. And then another thing, it's so funny, like your community was on my mind, because last week I was talking with a CEO who's a client and of a large management company. And she made the comment, she said, I always feel like, you get more intel from my sites than I do. She mentioned that. And I said, she said, I feel like I need to know more of what's going on. And, I feel, and this was a very raw conversation. She's like, if I'm being honest, I want to be on site more, but I feel more disconnected than ever just because of my responsibilities and all of these things. And I said, you know what? Here's a tip. I said, jump onto one of the groups, the Multifamily Insiders group. I said, they might not be your managers or your leasing agents, but in a sense they are. What you hear there is what's happening. And so I think that's what you said. One of the maybe most understated values is a pulse for the industry is what you can get from just browse a week worth of things. And you'll be like, wow, our teams are dealing with a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever a new supplier comes into the industry, it's so funny how many times a supplier has said, I needed to kind of get up to speed on what it's like to work on site. And they're like, this helps so much to just scroll through. And now, okay, now I understand. Now they can better serve their clients because they have a better insight into what's in their world, basically.
Oh yeah. So it's definitely not just for managers. Suppliers can, I mean, if you've never worked on site, that would be the quickest way. I love that you mentioned that. So how did you do it initially? I'm sure there were many layers, but how did you foster this community? How did you build it?
So a lot of TLC, to get something like that going where you get people to be comfortable and see as a place to actually go and interact. What I want to do, my goal was to make sure that nobody ever felt that they were speaking into the void, that they were always heard. So when somebody asked a question, I would go out and I would find somebody who was a subject matter expert in that area. Hey, can you come and help them with their question? Because I often wasn't the SME. I had my own little niche of knowledge, but there's a lot of other people who knew a lot more than I did. So for me, it was a lot of just pulling these resources together and say, okay, how can we help this person with this thing? And for a very long time, that took up a lot of my time to make sure that every question was answered, that we had good conversation on each one, until the community could stand on its own two legs and it could have enough interaction of its own that people organically then would interact and share and help each other out. And then it was kind of self-sustaining at that point. So a lot of it was just making sure that we were contributing. I contributed also as a member. So I wasn't just, I kind of dual role. I was both the kind of the admin of the group, I guess, and then also a member. So I could act in both ways, and I could help build a vibrant community. And so it wasn't a set it and forget it type of situation where, we built it. Now people are suddenly going to start talking. That's not how it works.
Right.
It takes a lot of TLC to make that happen.
I can't imagine how much time that took it's almost like you were a matchmaker, matching the right comment to the right person, or, getting that. But it obviously showed that hand holding was what was necessary at the beginning stages. Something that I've observed from the outside is as you've grown and your team has grown, you guys have managed to do that with the extensions of you, because a lot of times when you're the founder and you're the one person, it's hard to replicate that across the board. And just because I've interacted with a few from, your team, they've done the same thing. They've really made, like I've worked with, Lila, for example. I feel like I'm the only person in the room when she's emailing me. Like I screenshotted her email the other day and I sent it to our customer service team. I was like, can you feel her personality through this email? And they're like, yes. I said, she's, we connected on sourdough bread making, but the fact that she knew to do that, to connect that. So how have you done that as your team has grown?
Oh, shoot. I mean, it's weird because we're a distributed team. So we all work from home.
Right.
We do try to connect in person every so often, but that's challenging. I don't know if I have a secret ingredient to that. I mean, finding awesome people and just letting them shine. It's so awesome. Like you mentioned Lila, for example, and this is the same thing with everybody. It's like, I'll start seeing people tag them or mention them in other emails and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that's the absolute best situation. Like it makes me so excited when I see somebody else tagging Lila on LinkedIn, for example. Like, wow, it's so neat to see. Yeah, I think I'm just lucky to have awesome people. I mean, really, when it comes down to it. And I think that we've been around long enough that people can feed into the community ethos that we have, both internally as a team and then also with Multifamily Insiders as an external community, so everybody kind of sees what we're trying to accomplish. And I like to think that maybe, I always try to walk the walk and make sure that I am, I go overboard with customer service, and it's actually, from a business perspective, that's actually been a challenge, because we have a social network and there's no cost to being a part of a social network. So we end up providing customer service to a very large chunk of the industry and don't get paid for it. Right. And so from a business perspective, it's challenging, but from a culture perspective, I feel like it was always the right thing to do. I remember one time where somebody called me up and said, hey, I need to register for brainstorming. Well, brainstorming is not our conference. It was Multifamily Pro. And so I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can help out. And so I got on Multifamily Pro's website. I'm looking up how to register and all that stuff. So I'm just helping them out how best I could for a different company completely. But I always felt like that's the kind of organization that I wanted to have. Yeah. I always wanted to feel like we were just there for there for people. And hopefully then that means that eventually they'll be there for us. And it's all kind of worked out that way.
Yeah. I think you could say that, oh, you just happen to, you have awesome people, but I would more venture to say that the awesome people, when it comes to hiring is a marketing game as well. And I think when they see what has been built, you probably wouldn't apply to Multifamily Insiders and think I can just kind of lay low and do the bare minimum. So I think that's a standard. And then on top of that, I also think what's neat about it is that all of you guys have different personalities, and you can feel that in the emails. So even though the customer service feels the same, it feels unique. And so that's, to me, what I think is so empowering about when you build a team like that they're carrying on that feeling, but not necessarily in a cookie cutter, has to be like Brent kind of way. And I think that's, that's pretty cool.
So a little secret information about how our team has grown. So my wife is very, very social. I mean, one of the most social people I've ever met. So she knows a ton of people. So anytime that we're like, hey, we need to grow, we have all these things we have to do, my wife is like, well, let me see. And so she like, oh, so-and-so's looking for something. So-and-so's looking for something, right? So everybody on my team right now is actually friends with my wife. And so like, some people might see that as like kind of like a, so all of your, wife's friends now work for you. And like, is that concerning at all? And like, no, it turned out great. Like, she has great taste in people. And so that's worked out. And so we were talking about, we're hiring somebody new. We're like, well, let's go to Kirsten.
Yeah.
Who does she have for us now? And yeah, so that's apparently how our company has grown.
That is amazing. So I think every HR recruiter that listens to this show is going to be like, how do we get her to work for us
Right,
and find us
exactly.
these people?
Yes.
Okay, I want to segue because I would love a great takeaway. I mean, I think, one of the skills I always talk about is I think it's great when you can recognize something related to your industry, but maybe not exactly, and you can pull from it. And so for the property managers, the on-site teams that are listening, I feel that there is so much that they can glean from how you all have built community. What are some strategies that they could adapt or, kind of tweak to make work for those on-site community building?
So I think the first thing when a community thinks about building a sense of community, like a resident-to-resident interactions, those types of relationships, the first thing I think they need to think about is what are their goals? So going back to, what challenges that we had with my previous company with the social network. So Facebook, it was growing and fan pages were becoming a thing. And so now all these communities were like, hey, well, we can have a social presence. We can have our own fan page and it's free, right?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with fan pages. I think, there's some challenges that Facebook,
right.
Is a pay to play model type of situation, but there's nothing wrong with them. But it does have a specific mode of communication. It is a community to resident communication, or it's like a one-to-many communication, right? And they can reply back. And sometimes they can reply to each other if it's, sometimes that happens, but it's not really geared towards resident to resident interaction. That's not, it's the way it's designed or built. So I think it's thinking about what do we want our goals to be? Where do we find value? When I think about, how I enter the industry and like, if I just knew one person, right? Like, is that the goal? Is the goal to say, how are we going to make those connection points? And we already do it with our summer parties, right? And we just have to, kind of understand or be comfortable with this idea of them communicating when we're not over their shoulder, but by giving them different avenues for communicating, it helps them in different ways. Not everybody's gonna be comfortable going to the summer party, And so how do we provide those opportunities and be okay, and then strategies to make sure it's a positive experience. So with the multifamily share space, for example, we have in the very first line, we have positive. That's a very important word. And we talked about that as the group was getting bigger and bigger, that we were focusing on positive interactions.
Yeah.
We do allow, we do want them to be able to share their frustrations, but it still has an underpinning of, hey, we're going to have a positive interaction with each other, right? Because it can go off the rails really easily with politics and that sort of thing. And I'll have people, send me a link and say, hey, is this kind of fitting with the positive mentality that you're going for? And we'll usually talk to that person and say, hey, this is our goal. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And they'll usually be understanding. Sometimes they're not, but generally speaking, they will be. And so by setting the tone, it can really kind of establish that and kind of create the ethos of that community. And also, it can be so strong as I think that when you develop a community and you have people who are really excited about what you're doing and they're very passionate and they truly become fans, right? I mean, Facebook is a fan page, but are they fans, right? When we were still, I guess had been around for a bit, so we had kind of developed this community, but we were still young in the sense that we had not grown to where we are yet. Well, we had somebody who blogged on the platform, and he said, I can't believe you all are just creating this free content for multifamily insiders, and they're making millions and off of your backs and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I just had a conversation with my wife, and I wasn't sure if I was going to have to go get a real job because we're about to go under, right? He has no idea what's going on, but that was his perception, right? And so at that moment, I had this thought of, well, what do I do? I could have removed it, but then it sets the tone of I'm trying to hide something. And then people really think that that I'm trying to build everything on the backs of everybody else. So instead, I left it up. And I was like, you know what, let's just be transparent. Let's just let people talk, right? And it was amazing to see the response of the community. I mean, my goodness, they rallied around. They basically said, he's created this place for us to all talk and share and discuss. And we know how this works. We know there's sponsors that are advertising, right? That's how they make ends meet. And we understand that. And that's the implied arrangement. We understand the value he's bringing. It got to the point though where they were defending so vigorously that I felt nervous for the guy. I was like, this post is actually doing him more harm than good.
Right.
And so at some point, I actually did remove it, going, I got to protect this guy now because I felt kind of bad for him. So, but we were able to develop a community that was really passionately positive about the community, and it kind of built this kind of self regulating, like this positive element to it, that helped us keep that way of thinking with the community. So I think when we think about apartment communities, I still feel like there are avenues for having really, really deep resident to resident engagements and connections. And I think there's ways to do it both in person and online. It's just a matter of understanding the tools available and creating a plan to how are we going to react in different scenarios, and how are we going to establish a positive and have it really be authentic. You can say we're going to be positive, but if your operations aren't positive, then you're going to have that disconnect. It's not going to come across authentically. So I think there's a real big opportunity there still. Unfortunately, I think things like having the wrong tools set back the industry to a certain degree on how they can actually leverage online social networks to make that happen.
Well, and also, I mean, you shared, so many good things, but also with that, what I'm hearing is like going back to our first part of our conversation, it took a lot of time and nurturing for this to happen. And so I would assume too that, just like we give credence to the fact that events take time to plan and to do, having an online community that you're overseeing and that you're fostering is also going to take time and energy and is going to need resources.
Yes. Yeah, I think that there's so many great opportunities to be, like I said, both an admin and a member. Think about leveraging the external community. Have every week, hey, we're gonna showcase a really cool place that we ate at or whatever, or this event is coming up. Who's going to go check it out or whatever? There's so many amazing content ideas that happen that can be leveraged, and that also sets the tone, right? That we're going to share really awesome things, and you can set that in your marketing of it, of sharing amazing things that are happening in and around the community. And that's what the goal is. That's the purpose of the community. And it's not going to always go that way. There's going to be things that kind of veer off, and then just having a plan for that and going, okay, let's be authentic. It's like reputation management. How do we approach those that are not, positive? Well, there's good ways and bad ways to do that. And so we, at least this way, you have almost opportunities to avoid that negative review because you have the opportunity to really deal with it in-house, and you know what they're talking about. So there's really some neat things there.
Absolutely. And I think that people forget, community is happening whether you're actively overseeing it, like you said, like mom and dad, or whether you're not, it's happening. So when people say, how do you build community? It's already happening. You just get to decide what role you play in it. And I think that the retention piece that you mentioned there, that's huge. It's almost like those conversations are happening. How cool that you could be a part of it in a sense. Like you said, maybe be the admin and be a member and have real life. And in a real family, you're going to have conflict. But I think too, people are lonely and people are sick of bad news. And so creating a space like that is really it's a win for so many different reasons.
Yeah. And I think setting the guidelines, the rule, the boundaries, as it were, we have a no politics rule on there. And some people don't like that rule, but it keeps things healthy. And so if you set those up probably at the beginning, you can then remove that because, hey, you know what? There's tons of places to talk about politics, but this is not the place that we're trying to foster that.
Right.
So setting the kind of guidelines, both good and bad, or can help alleviate that and give you the tools where you're not being malicious in how you moderate that community.
Yes, that's such a good point, to set it up right so that you're not then blindsided and you have your guidelines, your guiding principles. So I think these are some great takeaways. And as a supplier, I feel like, when you're trying to foster community, these are some great tips as well, is to really, hear what your clients are saying in a way that, I've seen that happen with other suppliers as well. And I think that the fear factor can be there. Oh, what if it goes negative? But I've seen this in many cases, like your experience, where how much more powerful that your community comes to your defense than that you have to take it down, or reputation management with these outside tools rather than you addressing it, knowing what's actually happening. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to know what's next for Multifamily Insiders. What do you guys have? Y'all, every year it's like something exciting is coming up.
Well, you know what? I'm actually having a challenge because we're trying to do probably too many big projects right now. So I'm a little underwater, but I'll tell you about one,
Okay.
which is we realized that, like, I was kind of mentioning how there's so much going on site, that there's so many things that's hard to keep up with what's out there in multifamily. We have so many different types of service providers that's hard to get our arms around what's available and who does what. So we decided to do a demo day. So it's actually going to be 1 or 2 days of where we just bring in suppliers and showcase kind of what's going on, kind of dig in a little bit deeper than one would normally see about what their service is all about. And then people can kind of take a look at that and kind of get a sense for what's happening in the industry, what might work for them. So that's going to be a big thing in about 2 months. In fact, we started asking what companies would you like to see in demo day? And I was just scrolling through these yesterday, and I saw your company name on there.
Ooh,
so somebody was saying, hey, I want to get more information about them.
That's awesome to hear. I think it's so cool because I've done a reverse trade show before, and it sounds like in a way it's a concept similar, but I think in a way that people are maybe less intimidated than having to be in person. So I think this is going to be really successful and really exciting.
I hope so.
Yeah. So we'll stay tuned to see that. Now, I love that you guys have different platforms. It's almost like whatever way you like to communicate. So can you talk about just the differences in what the platforms offer? And for those that maybe aren't part of the community yet, how they can be a part of it?
Sure, yeah. So multifamilyinsiders.com is our primary hub. And so there's ways to interact there and get thought leadership and really dig in some really deep topics. We also have a tools area, which with just hundreds of downloadable resources. So there's a lot of really great stuff there. And you can get all of that for free just by creating an account. So it's really easy to get involved. We also have a multifamily share space Facebook group. And so that's a lot of amazing conversations there. We have a Multifamily Insiders LinkedIn group, which is actually our very first home. We started it as a LinkedIn group in 2008. Wow. So that group has 45,000 people, something like that. And so and each place has a little bit different, I don't know, not tone or just different topics they talk about. So Facebook was probably more on-site questions, whereas LinkedIn probably has more kind of like overall corporate and visionary type of thoughts on property management. So yeah, those are our main locations.
That's great. So I think people should definitely go there. I would say that the way that you described them is perfect. It's like LinkedIn feels a little more business executive, and there's some like higher level topics that are being discussed. To me, Facebook is like, I need to know what's really going on, like the real. Let me get on Facebook and see what's happening. And then I like the blog. I wish I like to dig in there. Like when I get there, it's like who you can pull from. I have a few favorites that I follow. And so I think that's a really neat place because it's so many different topics. So I encourage everyone to join the community and to have an active role. And you guys send out an email weekly, which I think is great because it's kind of a roundup of the best of the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's welcome to not only like, intake conversation, but also, be a thought leader yourself. Like every person, no matter what level they are in multifamily, has at least one great idea per year. I mean, you just joined the industry. You have a fresh perspective that nobody else has because things change so much, and a like you're saying, sometimes people higher up can get, they don't have the touch, the touch point with the on-site team, but somebody new does, and they have this fresh way of looking at things. Somebody who's been in the industry for 20, 30 years has a wealth of knowledge to share. So it's the only way our community survives is when people take time to share a little bit of their experience, a little bit of their brain, and that's what keeps it ticking.
That's perfect. So don't think that you have to be an expert. You've got an expert field in something. So Brent, this has been an incredible conversation. I know all the ins and outs that I feel I didn't know, and I'm so happy to know your story. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yay.